one device shows that it's 1 o'clock on the dot, and the other one shows 12:58. Ms. Hassan Musa, I just want to check with you your time.
Chair, my time says 1 o'clock.
Perfect. Colleagues, thank you for joining us today. We are in the Education Committee meeting today. Today, we are dealing with the briefing by Equal Education on school safety in the Western Cape, which was a stakeholder request, as well as a briefing by the Western Cape Education Department on learners with severe disabilities, which is emanating from a previous resolution of the committee. We will also then be dealing with the draft minutes of the 13th of June, as well as the draft minutes of 15th of August. Members, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to ask the members just please introduce themselves, and then I will ask the respective delegations to introduce themselves, and then we will jump straight into the first presentation. Members, you may go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chairperson. Good afternoon, colleagues. Phil and Christians.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. Christopher Fry.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair. Khalil Brankes. Good afternoon, colleagues.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairperson. Khalid Sayed, African National Congress.
Afternoon. Thank you for reading it out completely. Is there anyone else? Okay. With that, I'm going to start with the Equal Education delegation.
Good morning, Chair, and good afternoon, Chair, and good afternoon to all members and participants. I am Stacey Jacobs, and I'm the researcher at Equal Education.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. And the Chair, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Nseke Dlulani. I am the head of organizing in the Western Cape Equal Education. Thank you.
Afternoon.
Yes, hello to everyone. All protocols observed. I am Noang. I'm the General Secretary of Equal Education. It's really good to be here today.
Afternoon. Wonderful having you. Just want to check if I've missed anyone. If not, then I'm just going to quickly ask the WCED delegation for the second presentation just to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and members. Sigamani Naika, Western Cape Education Department.
Afternoon, Mr. Naika. I see we are meeting frequently this year. It's very encouraging.
It's true. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and members. Shannon Potgieter, Western Cape Education Department.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairperson. It's Dina Archery, Western Cape Education Department.
Afternoon. And then I saw Ms. Hassan Musa's name, hand up. I'm assuming it's probably to remind me of someone that I've missed.
No, Chair. I was under the impression that WCED will only join us from 2 o'clock, but I've seen they've joined us early.
No problem. WCED loves being with us, so they are, yeah. Wonderful. Ms. Jacobs, we're going to jump straight into your presentation. The members have received it, and then we're going to do the questions and answers afterwards. Do you want to share the presentation, or do you wish the procedural officer to share it? Perfect.
I have shared on the screen. Are members able to see it?
We are. You can maybe just put it into the slideshow option. Thank you.
Perfect. And my colleague Nsiki will start us off.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
All right, then. Thank you again for this opportunity. I mean, we really appreciate being given this space as a civil society movement that deals with schools and learners across South Africa. So today we're coming here to do a presentation around our safety report. So Equal Education is organized in 5 different provinces, and we are advocating for quality education. And in all of these 5 different provinces, we are holding different campaigns And in the Western Cape specifically, we have been advocating for a campaign around school safety. I mean, this campaign started in 2014, and it was clearly sort of like established as a school safety campaign in 2016. And since then, we've been very much vocal and speaking about the issues that are affecting learners mostly in the marginalized communities around the issues of school safety. So today we'll be doing sort of like a presentation around our recent report that we've launched. And our presentation will be speaking about the theory of change. We're going to be speaking about the school visits, around the objectives and methodology of the school visits that we did around the issues of safety in the Western Cape. And the third part of the presentation will be speaking around the findings, the types of reported violence in schools. And we'll also be taking the opportunity to sort of like present on the 4 pillars of school safety. That is part of our report. And the pillar 1 is around the security measures in line with the school infrastructure law, which is the uniform minimum norms and standard for public school infrastructure. And the second one is around the functional school-based safety structures that exist in schools to respond to the issues of safety. And the third one is around adequate provision of psychosocial support, the importance of such psychologists in psychosocial support in schools, as this is sort of like something that we don't really speak about when we speak about safety. We always think about safety as the physical part of it, but we don't speak about the psychological part of it. And the 4th pillar is around the knowledge and use of existing policies that are there in school. And the last part is around the recommendation. What are we recommending as equal education out of these 4 pillars and the findings that we have in moving forward? Then after that, we'll allow the comment, question and answer session. Thank you. You can move on, Stacey. Okay, so what is our theory of change as equal education? We are a membership-based movement that works in developing and conscientizing young people and organizing youth as enablers of equal and just and quality education in South Africa. And we do this through progressive reforms in policies and practices and material change in different schools, and through holding different spaces that we sometimes call youth groups. It can be seminars. We develop popular education. We hold membership meetings, and we do this through activism in school communities and across South Africa, which is through campaigning, writing letters to the government or to the targeted person at this point in time, through media and submissions and protest, because I mean, part of our work is to conscientize, but also making sure that the learners, the high school going learners that we work with, understand their rights in schools and understand their right to basic education. And everything and every work that we do at Equal Education, it is centered around the equalizers, who are the high school going learners, who are sort of like the learners who are the drivers of equal education, the learners who are affected by the challenges of safety each and every day in schools. And our beautiful post-school youth, and these are unemployed youth who are sort of like working together and bringing back to the community in working around fighting for a just and equal education for all. And within equal education, we sort of like have different departments, like the research departments working together with organizing departments into making sure that we have a strong movement that is able to speak up around the issues that are affecting these learners, but also the research part of it and analysis part of it, but the activism part of it, which is organizing and organizing spaces and giving voice to those young people to sort of like speak about their right to quality education and what does it mean to have or receive quality education. You can go on, Stacey. So what were the objectives of the school visits? So in 2019, between August and September, Equal Education in the Western Cape visited 40 public schools that are allocated across various areas of Cape Town metros. And these are some of the schools that we sort of like organized in, and some of the schools we're not really schools that we organized in, but we were able to go because we were looking at the communities, but also schools that are allocated in communities that are really not safe. And we had 3 objectives while doing the school visit. And the first objective was to determine and identify the types of violence that are happening in schools, and to identify and investigate the contributing factors around the violence that are happening in schools, and to understand whether these schools are adequately supported by the national and provincial government, and to create safe and resilient environments for learners, as well as to access the interventions that are implemented by the national and provincial government, and how are they sort of like positively shifting the experiences of school safety in the Western Cape. And I do want to say, although we did this school visits in 2019, we are a civil society movement that is organizing within the schooling communities, and we work really closely with schools. And before we even came into spaces like this, before we even launched the report, we had different engagement within the school communities that we organize in, be it with teachers, be it with principal, be it with learners, where we said, this is the report and that these are the issues that are still affecting you. And the response that we got from these different spaces was that these are the issues that are still existing around the school safety concerns in the Western Cape, even through principals and teachers. These are the challenges that they're still facing. So although I want to stretch it out and say, although this social audit was done in 2019, but the findings of this social audit and the recommendations of the social audit and what we're going to present here, it's still very much active, and it's still other struggles and concerns that are being faced in schools in the Western Cape. Stacey, you can come in.
Great, thank you. So I want to take us through the methodology that we followed for these school visits. I just want to say that equalizers were centered at every part of the process. Equalizers at Equal Education refer to our learner members of the movement, so those who are currently attending high school and are able to give insight into the issues and experiences that they, or the issues and the experiences of their schooling. So we carried out our school visits in 2 phases. For the first phase, it consisted of both a structured interview and a physical observation tool. In terms of the structured interview, we interviewed members of school management teams, such as principals or deputy principals, as well as teachers or safety officers at the school level. And we'd asked questions about the type of violence that occurred at the school, as well as the adherence to norms and standards for school infrastructure, which we'll speak on a little bit later, access control measures taken by the school, the availability of psychosocial support, the functionality of safety structures, as well as knowledge and use of the National School Safety Framework and other safety interventions. The physical observation tool was a tool that we used to observe whether schools had physical security infrastructure in line with the school infrastructure law. So that is the norms and standards for school infrastructure, as well as to identify certain conditions at the school that may give way to threatening safety issues, such as secluded areas on school property or walls that are easy to scale. The second phase of our school visits comprised of follow-up interviews with members of school safety committees and school-based support teams. And what was important here was for us to understand the roles and responsibilities that these structures have, as well as the very challenges that they may run into when trying to carry out these duties. In compiling this report, we used information gathered from the school visits and also supplemented it with findings from interviews that we conducted with experts on safety and violence, as well as government budget documents and information that we received from the Western Cape Education Department through a Promotion of Access to Information Act request. And we've also drawn on information that has been shared in these Standing Committee on Education meetings in the past. Nsiki? Excuse me. So in terms of the findings, something that came out quite strongly for us was how the communities that schools are based in, or the schools that the communities that schools are based in, influence the types of social dynamics that we see at play at schools and the type of safety incidents that occur. So one of our questions was, in the structured interview, was to find out from members of the school management team the type of violent incidents that were disclosed to the school administration in the year preceding the school visit. So at 20% of the schools we visited, physical assault resulting in serious injury to a learner was reported. And in defining serious injury to a learner, this is a circumstance where a learner would need to be hospitalized following the physical assault. We found that stabbings occurred at 38% of the schools that we visited. There was sexual harassment reported at 23% of the schools. Interviewees also told us that at 18% of the schools, there was physical assault against a teacher by a learner. And lastly, at 8% of schools, there was physical assault resulting in significant injury to a teacher. Going to move us on and speak to the major threats to learner safety in schools. And I think this is where we can see that schools mirror the communities in which they are based. The social dynamics ultimately infiltrate schools, as well as the social ills that infiltrate schools. And we found that drug use was prevalent at 85% of the schools we visited, alcohol use at more than half of the schools, as well as burglary at more than half of the schools. Significant vandalism was considered a significant threat at half of the schools. Gang violence was a major threat to learner safety at 53% of the schools, and theft of personal property was identified as a major threat to learner safety at 63% of these schools. Nsiki?
Sure. I see Nongoda wants to come in before I do the first pillar. Sido, you can come in.
Thanks, Nsiki. I just wanted to make the point that from the very beginning, we know that the initial sort of findings of this report happened in 2019. And we all sort of suffered from the COVID period around coming back to communities and using provincial legislatures like this to report on our findings. But what we have done in that period between then and now is consistently go back to these school communities that we had used as case studies and sites of struggle for this information, and continue to also engage the thousands of learners that we organize in the Western Cape around the reality of these sort of findings that we're putting to people. So just an acknowledgement that the initial process started a while back, but in that period between then and launching and speaking to you all now, we've engaged learners, we've engaged principals, school communities, school governing bodies to assess whether some of these conditions still are in fact a reality. And there will be acknowledgement as we go on of some improvements. But I think from a systemic level, these are definitely still things that we'd like the committee to consider, and the Education Department in the Western Cape.
Sure. Thanks, Tangata, for that. So the first pillar around the findings of school safety, I think Stacey has sort of like explained the different phases around our social audit questionnaires and while we were conducting the school visits, and the part of it was around the physical part of safety. And This was to sort of like do a security measures in line with the school infrastructure law. And at the beginning, I've mentioned that around the uniform minimum norms and standards for public school infrastructure. And I think for those who maybe are not familiar with that, it is a law that sort of like speaks about what makes a school, be it around the size of the classroom, be it laboratories, be it fencing, be it everything that makes a school a school. And Regulation 9 of the norms and standards for school infrastructure require schools to have perimeter at least one other form of safety and security, a security guard or patrol or an alarm system. And I think part of the uniform minimum norms and standards for public infrastructure, as it sets different deadline, and this was one of the deadline that was supposed to be met in 2020, that all schools in South Africa needs to make sure that they have perimeter fencing. And the findings around the security infrastructure assessment from the schools that we visited revealed that schools in the Western Cape are sort of like in various stages with the compliance of this school infrastructure law. And I mean, this means that there were schools that we visited that we saw that the fencing was sort of like meeting the requirements that is written in the law. And in some of the schools that we visited, we saw that it doesn't really meet the requirements that is in the norms and standards law. That's why we're presenting this. We're also saying that different schools within the Western Cape are in sort of like different stages in terms of complying with the law. You can pass on, please. Okay, so as we said at the beginning, that we've surveyed 40 schools, and all the 40 schools surveyed in 2019 had some form of fencing. However, through our observations, as I said before, there were some schools were sort of like meeting the requirement and some were not. And a little more than like a quarter, which is 11 schools that we sort of like surveyed, fencing that did not meet 1.8 meters height of the standard. And 5 had fencing that did not cover the entire school field. And I think, as Noncedo has mentioned, we have seen some improvement in some of the schools that we organize in. That in 2019 didn't have this kind of or we're not rather meeting the compliance of the norms and standards. Now some of the fences have been fixed, and some of the fences are sort of like covering the whole schools, and there are some schools that are still so much in facing of these struggles around the 1.8 meter fencing height, and some of the schools not really covering up either the fencing is in the front and the side of the school, and at the back side of the school the fencing is not really there. You can. So as we speak about the physical part of the security, or rather perimeter fencing as it's written in the norms and standards, so that out of the schools that we audited or surveyed rather, and this is like when we speak about 72, we're speaking about the 72 out of the 40 schools that we surveyed. It doesn't speak about all the schools that exist in the Western Cape. So 72 of the schools, 72% of the schools, they said they had a security guard at the school, and 28% of those schools said no, they do not have a security guard. And 82% of the schools said yes, they had a security guard present for the entire school day, which is the entire school day. Some of the schools are operating from like 7 till 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. when the last sort of like leaving the school. They said they had 82% of those schools said that they have a security guard the entire day school, and 18% they said no, and 56% they said they do have a security guard that is present at night, and 44% of the schools said they do not have a security guard that is present at night. And 87% of the schools, they said they have an alarm system, and 30% of the schools, they said they did not have an alarm system. And some of the comments, or rather the reflections that we got from the schools, is that sometimes the alarm system only exists within the administration part of the schools, but any other blocks of the school, it does not really, they don't have an alarm system there. And 91% of the schools said they have a school functioning alarm system, while 9% of some of the schools said they do not have a functioning alarm. And I mean, this is like one of also the most important part of school safety, so that if there's any crime or vandalizing or any kind of unsafe incident that is happening in school, so that schools are able to respond quickly. Stacey?
Thank you, Nsiki. And I think just to add on the security measures in line with the school infrastructure law, specifically when we're thinking about the conditions of perimeter fencing, for example, and the upkeep of alarm systems or intercom systems, we understand that schools are advised to use a portion of their national norms and standards for school funding and allocate or direct that money towards efforts that safeguard the school, equipment upgrades and existing security mechanisms. So these all form part of day-to-day maintenance. But schools, once that pot of money dries out, schools are required to supplement it with their own income. But we can understand that this is particularly challenging for schools situated in poorer communities, or who are no-fee schools and are not able to collect income through fee collection. And they are encouraged to seek donations and engage in fundraising activities, but they will have limited access to this, and they'll have limited access to this in order to supplement their government allocations. But this is often insufficient, and it means that poorly resourced schools are unable to implement proper maintenance on existing infrastructure, especially when they are subject to recurring vandalism. I'm going to move us on to functional school-based safety structures. And these are essential structures at the school level that enhance a safe and resilient school environment. The School Safety Committee is a committee made up of different members of the school community, including but not necessarily limited to parents, learners, teachers, principals, members of the school governing body, and a member of the school management team. In addition to this, a safety officer must also be formally appointed by the principal to sit on this committee with specific duties or roles and responsibilities, including the development of a safety plan that is tailored to the specific school. The committee is responsible for the committee, headed by the safety officer, is responsible for designing and implementing a school safety plan, and also to monitor it to check how well it works. At the 40 schools we visited, 68% of these schools had a safety committee and said that it was functional, and 32% had a safety committee and it was not functional. Just a comment on the functionality of these committees. When we probed a little more around, what functionality was, it came out that what came out through those through that probing was that these committees were still not necessarily functional in the full sense, i.e. they did not meet regularly, they did not have any record keeping in place, they did not have a suitable safety plan that was adjusted or tailored to their specific school context, and this affects the functionality and effectiveness of the safety committee at the school level. And then in terms of the safety plan that they are responsible for developing, the safety plan should outline both proactive and reactive measures that respond to safety threats and that provide communication protocols that must be followed following a safety threat or a safety incident. And the safety plan is a comprehensive document that helps schools adequately prepare for different safety challenges in their respective contexts. So it should not necessarily be the use of a standard template, but rather one that takes the school and its unique challenges into account and adequately responds to them or advises on proactive and reactive measures. At 60% of the schools, they reported having a safety plan and using the safety plan. And 40% of the schools had a safety plan, but does not use it. When looking a little closely and speaking about the safety plan with our interviewees, we were able to have a look at some of these. However, it came out, what we saw was that, on occasion, the fire escape plan was misunderstood as the safety plan. So essentially, they didn't have a safety plan in the truest sense of what it is supposed to be at the school level. Thank you.
Okay, I'm also looking at the time. So, I mean, at the beginning, we spoke about the different pillars that we sort of like came out of the report. We spoke about the adequate provision of psychosocial support. And I mean, I think this is something that we like, in a lot of spaces, we don't speak about when we speak about safety. We sometimes, when we speak about safety, only speak about the physical part of it and not speak about how does that also affect the learner's emotional and mental well-being. And we believe as equal education that you can't speak about school safety and not speak about the psychosocial support of learners, because I think a lot of times when we sometimes speak about safety, we speak about what happens if a school is in an unsafe area. There's no way that that school will be safe. And I think it also goes with the side around the psychosocial support. And so physical safety does affect learners emotionally and around mental well-being. And psychosocial services are both about to support learners and proactively sort of like address the issues that are contributing to in-school violence. And I think in order for us to have learners who are very much active and able to learn and be productive in schools, but also grow personally and increase their focus and concentration in class, we need to be able to have psychosocial support in schools. And when we visited few of the schools during the surveying and social, or rather social audit time for school visits, we saw that a lot of schools that didn't have psychosocial support in schools, which is maybe a designated social worker or a psychologist in school, and how that was sort of like affecting learners. And a lot of time the reflection we'll get from the school community will be in schools where there's a designated social worker. You could even see from the learners that they really are encouraging and appreciative of that, and of that process, and having a psychologist in school. And in different schools where we sort of like went and did the school visits, they didn't have psychologists that are designated in schools. And you'd find that sometimes the teacher who's sort of like playing the role of being the social worker is feeling the weight and the overwhelming part of it, and having to teach, but at the same time taking care of learners around their psychological part of things. 30% out of the 40 schools we visited did not have a social worker based at the school. And some of the reflections we sort of like got from the school community was, even though the social worker is not based at the school, even the turnaround time when a case is reported is sort of like different, and it can be a disadvantage. And even when we have conversations with the learners that we organize in, they would say we are in need of social workers, but even the social workers that are designated in our schools, not only in our schools, but also in the circuit schools that are under a certain district, the turnaround time is not really, it's really playing at their disadvantage. And 30 schools had had one teacher who's designated to provide initial psychosocial support. Although some of these teachers had not received any training for this duty. And I mean, this is something that I was talking about at the beginning, to say the training part of it is very important, because you'd find that a lot of these teachers are feeling the weight of playing the role of providing the psychosocial support for learners. And 35% of out of the 39 schools, they responded that they had a school-based support team that ensure that learners who need counseling or psychological support are appropriately referred. And I think we all know that after COVID, this is something that has been sort of like in need and common for schools, not only in the Western Cape, but in South Africa as a whole, where the need of psychosocial support is really becoming in demand. And I mean, we're going to come into the recommendation as to what are we recommending as equal education, but we believe that you can't speak about the physical part of safety and not speak about how does the physical part of it affect the psychological and mental side of learners.
Thank you, Nsiki. So I want to speak about the knowledge of and use of existing policies. We know that accessing and fully enjoying any right begins with knowledge, and the Department of Basic Education and all provincial education departments have an obligation to ensure that schools are safe, threat-free, and supporting learners' environment for learners and the broader school communities. And an awareness of the government's responsibilities to schools is the first step in accessing and enforcing deliveries. So because of this, we wanted to know whether schools had any knowledge of the existence of policies that regulate safety and security at schools. So we asked representatives from each school about their awareness or familiarity with the National School Safety Framework, which is touted as the Department of Basic Education's key strategic intervention in terms of safe schools. And we also wanted to know about their familiarity and use of the services offered by the Western Cape's Safe Schools program. Both of these are important policies that aim to address school safety. In terms of the National School Safety Framework, we found that there is a significant gap in the knowledge and awareness of the contents of this framework. We also saw that many schools did not have the necessary support, safety structures, and procedures in place to implement it. And the National School Safety Framework sets out specific, very specific items that schools have to adhere to in order to successfully implement the framework. For example, one of these requirements is a functional school safety committee. However, as I spoke to earlier in this presentation, not all schools had fully capacitated and trained safety committees that were receiving adequate support from the Western Cape Education Department, as well as those that weren't operating optimally or functionally. In terms of, so without being able to have those very important structures in place, they are unable to then implement the National School Safety Framework. In terms of the Safe Schools Call Center, this is one aspect of the WCED Safe Schools program that allows learners and any members of the school community to place calls following a safety incident or during a safety incident and report it in order for the school to receive assistance. We received information from the WCED through a prior request that showed that almost no learners use the Safe Schools Call Center to report issues. In that document, we found that of the over 5,000 calls that were placed to the call center between 2019 and 2020, learners made up just 0.1% of them. Some schools that did not find the call center helpful in addressing issues also told us that there was typically a high call volume, which meant they had to wait quite long before they were assisted. And in some cases, they didn't get any feedback on the problems that they had successfully reported to the Safe Schools call center. In terms of the findings, 18 out of 38 of the schools did not know of the National School Safety Framework, and as I've mentioned earlier, were thus not able to implement it. 21 of the 40 schools had the toll-free call center number visibly displayed on their premises for ease of access to learners. So this is the number for the Safe Schools call center. Typically, it is visible in the administrative block or by the receptionist's office, so that learners may use this number and other members of the school community to report any safety incidents. At 28 schools that we visited, so only 28 schools of those schools that we visited reported that they made use of the Safe Schools call center. And as I said, this is a crucial offering that allows members of the school community to report any safety concerns or violent incidents so that authorities or officials can provide the necessary support or refer them appropriately. So in terms of our recommendations, I'll take us through this now. Firstly, our report calls on the Department of Basic Education to commission a fully funded revised round of the National School Violence Study. The National School Violence Study was last done as a partnership between the Center for Justice and Crime Prevention and the Department of Basic Education in 2008 and again in 2012. This gave us a large study on the state of school safety for secondary learners across South Africa, so not just the Western Cape. And this data is important in terms of understanding where every province is, and including the Western Cape, in terms of addressing safety and seeing positive shifts in the safety realities that learners face every day. So we call on the Western Cape Education Department to take this forward with the Department of Basic Education to ensure that we have legitimate and trustworthy and credible data on school safety. Nsiki?
Sure. And the second recommendation is around the physical part, and I think we've been speaking about the norms and standards and the infrastructure law. So we are recommending the Western Cape Education Department should coordinate with the Department of Education to ensure that agent and full compliance with the security requirement in the school school infrastructure law by ensuring that adequate access to control measures are in place in making sure that schools are safe, and especially like the schools in high risk areas, to make sure that there's installation or maintenance of physical security infrastructure to protect them from any possible crimes such as burglary, vandalism, and trespassing. Yeah.
Sure. Our third recommendation is that the Western Cape Education Department should support schools in establishing functional safety committees. And we've offered 3 different ways in how this can be done. So firstly, to assist schools with identifying safety stakeholders within their communities that can be members on the safety committee and can offer their expertise in developing appropriate and tailored school safety plans. We also suggest providing that the WCED provide initial and any additional training sessions for members of the safety committee that cover their roles and responsibilities and the development of comprehensive safety plans, again, that are tailored to their respective contexts. And this is especially important as we note that the School Safety Committee is a subcommittee of the school governing body. And oftentimes, as school governing bodies change and when when members of the school safety committee changes, it is essential that top-up training is provided to new members who are coming on board and that record-keeping systems are in place. So that is the final the final recommendation that we have for the WCED in terms of this pillar, and that is ensuring that systems are in place to prevent loss of knowledge within the committee, particularly as its composition changes. Thank you very much, Ntiki.
So the second last one is around psychosocial support, and we believe that the WCD should assist schools in sort of like strengthening the provision of access to psychosocial support. And we think this can be done by ensuring that school-based support teams are trained and capacitated, and that schools condition allow for roles to be accommodated, the roles of the people that will be doing psychosocial support to be accommodated, be it, you know, if there's a classroom where the psychology can sort of like a social worker can hold these sessions and be it a safe space for our learners, and to increase the capacity of professional psychosocial support services through doing partnership with the Department of Social Development, Department of Health, as well as any relevant NGOs that are working around psychosocial support. I mean, we have few organizations around the Western Cape that are doing very like important work around providing psychosocial support in schools, Ilitalabantu, FAMSA, and all of these different organizations. So we believe if the Western Cape Education Department can work together with these different departments and organizations that are dealing with psychosocial support to assist schools, and sort of like also avail alternatives, or rather exploring new and creative way to deliver psychosocial support to learners, and creative ways, because I mean we're dealing with young people who are responding to things differently, and this can be through telephonic or mobile apps as a form of consultation, so that it's also not just having a social worker in school, but it's also, you know, a service that is sort of like motivating learners to come and speak with psychologists, but also motivating learners to be able to attend these sessions in creative ways. So yeah.
Our final recommendation to the Western Cape Education Department is that they should improve the knowledge and internal capacity of schools on national and provincial school safety interventions, including the National School Safety Framework and the Safe Schools Program. Our report offers 5 ways in which this can be done. And firstly, it's for the Western Cape Education Department to provide regular training on for schools on how to implement the National School Safety Framework, as well as necessary resources such as available training providers outside of the department that can provide this training. Secondly, that they follow up with schools that have undergone this training to understand and assist them with any challenges that they may face in implementing the National School Safety Framework. We also recommend that the WCD assist schools to increase awareness of the Safe Schools Call Center among learners, and we've recommended, you know, that this be done through the provision of materials such as pamphlets, presentations, and school assemblies that outline the functions of the call center, and, you know, with the provision of merchandise, example, stationery, rulers, or pens, that provides learners easy access to the Safe Schools Call Center number. We also recommend that the WCED monitor schools to ensure that they are providing all schools are provided with the necessary signage that has the call center's toll-free number, and that this is visibly displayed at key areas on the school premises. And lastly, by adequately capacitating the Safe Schools Call Center to deal with high call volumes and ensure that schools and other callers receive timely assistance or referrals. Thank you. Noncedo?
Yeah, I think just as a parting shot, just 3 things to share looking at this full report. The first thing is that Nziki did mention that we work in 4 other provinces, but and the school safety issue or challenge is heard by learners across these provinces, but it is particular to learners and children in the Western Cape, and that's why we are running a school safety campaign in this province, because that's what learners had identified for us. And so in this presentation, in this report, 2 things maybe for members to note is that it is absolutely evidence-based. That is in the nature of the model of the way that equal education works. But what makes EE's contributions in this environment different or unique is that it is also very much children-centered and learner-led. And I just wanted to impress that on the members here. And 3 things inside that we're threading in these sort of recommendations is the first is that it is our duty to try and make sure that we are making the truth of these learners and these children powerful through advocacy and through activism. And this is for us one tool that we can use to encourage participatory democracy for children in the education system in the Western Cape. So please hear their truth. The second thing is that it is our intention to support and build and strengthen state capacity in this province and in South Africa. And we're doing it through using this learner voice to make sure that we can help ensure that policy can in fact meet and match the experience of the schooling environment. So we don't take away that there may be some interventions in place. What we're talking about now is how they are experienced inside of the schooling environment on a day-to-day basis. And I'd also like to leave that with members here. And the very last is that we do know that school safety is complex because it is a full school community competency. The journey to and from school is crucial to how these children are reflecting on school safety. And the things that we're proposing here are also going to require a shift in culture of the schooling environment. But in order for that culture to shift in the immediate, because this is quite a crucial issue, we do think that we must consider some policy interventions very much at a systemic level, at the WCED level as well. And that's why we're making these recommendations. Not to be taken lightly, but also to be received as something that's meant to contribute to the better good of the safety of children and school staff in these environments. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Colleagues, I'm going to take hands now on the respective presentation. I see Member Christian's hand. I see Member Syed's hand. If there are no other hands, then I will go third in that order. Oh, I see Member Fry's hand. Okay, so Christian, Syed, Fry in that order. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I'm not going to go into all the questions. I think, Chair, I'll limit me to 3. I think that is maybe the norm, limit us to 3. Chair, I am a bit concerned with the presentation because, you know, you can have the findings and you can have this presentation, and I've listened quite attentively. And I heard what the speaker at the end said. It's learner-led and hear the truth. You know, please hear the truth. I've got a concern because you see, when it comes to the school infrastructure with the fencing, and you know, we've given Member Syed the title of Mr. Fencing. You know, there was extra budget, extra money made available for fencing, and you know, so. What I'm trying to ask and what I'm saying is almost there's a disconnect, because with everything that they've said, there is budgetary constraints and there's budgets that you must implement. So I would think, you know, from my side, I would think you look at what is the projection for the year, what must be implemented, and was that implemented? Because it's almost like you're looking now for extra budget, and that is, we're not going to get there. When you say this is our recommendations, and then you must still go look for budgets. What I would have suggested is, did the WCED, for everything that they did they, the fencing, was that done? You know, 30 fencing a year for that schools, was that done? So then we're getting somewhere, because I also think that equal education should have engaged before they even came to the ceremony, engage the department and hear from them. You know, this is what the findings are, because I agree with them. We cannot compromise the safety of our learners. I'm 100%. But what I'm saying is, it's one thing identifying the problems, and then the department must now go look for that money. And that is the disconnect that I see. The second thing that I want to mention, Chair, I think, Chair, we've been to many schools, and this is now already my 9th year. I've been part of education 2014. We've been to many schools. We know basically what the problems are, and we always say it's a whole of society approach, because the child comes from home, there's situations there, and it then filters into the school. I've just been to a couple of schools. I'm tomorrow again, just speaking to some people, but it filters in, you know. So it's more for me a whole of society approach, and you know, it stems back to you know, changing the mindsets and you know, and getting the parents and those things involved. So it's a big problem. It's not a small problem. The other thing, just two last things that I want to mention is gangs. You know, gangs is a terrible thing happening in the townships. And I've been to a school some time ago as where students, the learners comes in with tattoos, you know, and it's terrible. So that is a major problem. Alcohol and drug, 85%, 50%, it's major problems. They said now with some policy interventions, but I really don't know, Chair. I think we will have to sit down. We will not be able to digest and discuss everything, but we'll have to sit down and see from a committee's point of view, speaking to the department, what we can do to improve the safety. But, you know, because we definitely, I know the department don't have the budget, so that is my concern. The last thing that I want to mention is we've also said for a long time the psychosocial support, and we know we've engaged the department with that, you know, social services and all of that. We've done that exercise, and still there's no resources to do all of that. So that is the disconnect between what they are saying, what the department have on their books, on the budget, and how do we take this forward. It's a discussion, and I'm interested in safety. You know that we're all interested in the safety of our learners, but I think we must be pragmatic. And what can we do almost in the department do immediately? What is on their books, and what will be done for this financial year? And can we maybe look at the certain things that it's priority and take it forward? So Chair, there's a lot that I can say, but I'm just going to leave it there. I think you know where the gist of what I'm saying, the disconnect between the equal education and department, and we as a committee we're pushing constantly for these things that they've mentioned. So it's not that we're unaware, we are aware, but you know, there's also budget concerns. Chair, I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Christians. I think that was actually quite a nice introductory question / input, because safety is a big problem facing our province, both inside and outside the classroom. And as a committee, we are always searching for ways to ensure to help make the Western Cape a safer place. I know, for example, and perhaps the department can always send us some extra information on the presentation from the WCED on the 3rd of November last year. We did learn of the 64 district-based support teams that have 64 psychologists, 64 learning support advisors, and 64 social workers that respective schools are supposed to tap into. So I do take also note that the presentation is based on a study from 2019. So perhaps we could ask for some of the raw data in order to be able to deal with more of the specifics that you've identified. Member Syed? Member Syed, you must remember to unmute. I know you've been in committees with me whole day and speaking a lot, but you must remember to unmute.
Am I now audible?
You are audible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, just on this particular presentation, firstly, let me welcome the presentation and also welcome the work being done by Equal Education in terms of assisting us also with our oversight work also. I think they've done really well. And I support the recommendations that they are making. But let me go perhaps from the beginning. In slide number 3, I think that's more theoretical. Let me get into the nuts and bolts. In slide number 6, I just wanted to get a sense as to were any of these attacks that are being referred to perpetrated by outsiders who gained access to the school grounds, and what recommendations are given to address these specific cases. Then also, does Equal Education continue with their monitoring of school safety at the moment? Are there any latest incidents that are worth highlighting? Can I go on to number 7, or should I slide 7, or do you want us to take this round and then come back later, Chair?
I'm assuming slide 7 is your third question.
Yes, it's my third question. Can I? Awesome.
Yes, you may.
So in my interaction with teachers in particular, in many gang-infested communities, there have been consistent complaints about robberies and hijackings when teachers are going to and from school. Now, we understand that SAPS has a role to play, but has Equal Education picked up on this issue? And what recommendations specifically can it give to curb this? Thank you. I'll come into my fencing in the next one. I know that member Christian.
Member side, I must still take member Fry's hand.
I'm saying later on.
Hand, and then I will do another round. Yes. Member Fry.
Thank you very much, Chair. Member Christians has partly covered me in the sense of the interaction with the Western Cape Education Department. I just wanted to ask, with respect to the areas in which the school had the areas in which where the schools had inadequate safety plans, which areas were they? The second question is with respect to mental health. Is there collaboration between NGOs who work in schools that focus on mental health and they foster better mental health for the children? And then the Safe Schools call center, is there public education? Is there better? I know you recommend that the posters be put in strategic areas in the schools, but is there a wider public education campaign about this? And I think that maybe that I'd like to know whether they've engaged the Western Cape Education Department about my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Member Brancase. I'm going to take your hand as the first hand in the second round of questions, just so that we're not overwhelming the presenters with questions, because that is about 9 questions now that have been posed. So I will take your hand in the first round, the first hand in the second round, if that's okay with you. I'm going to take that as a yes. Okay. Ms. Jacobs, as well as I think it was Ms. Lulani, sorry. You can allocate the respective questions accordingly.
Sure, and Monledo will be coming in for the first round.
Okay,
no
I'll
problem.
take a first stab. So yesterday we had a really exciting meeting with senior officials from the WCED, and we presented this very same presentation. And what we learned out of that engagement, well, the first thing is that we are both committed now to a quarterly meeting to keep each other updated.
Hi, Ms. Donpedo. I think you've been muted every now and then. I'm also getting muted, so maybe just unmute again.
Okay.
There we go. Perfect.
I thought that was the message to shush. Okay. So we've had a really exciting engagement with the WCED, committing to quarterly meetings to keep each other updated from either side. And in that meeting, the fence story did come up. So we know that there are issues with fencing going up in schools and typically coming down soon after that. So being vandalized by communities and being used, sold in scrapyards and things of that nature. And so part of the reason that our recommendations are implying this idea of a school community approach is because we do want to will the Western Cape Department of Education to run an interdepartmental intervention. So not just community, but also using structures like community safety and SAPs to monitor and safeguard schools in the times that there aren't people inside. And then the second thing, maybe connected to the FEN story, in our own advocacy, Equal Education also does budget monitoring at a provincial and at a national level around the education budget. And we know that Treasury has recently announced that the austerity fiscal agenda is about to tighten. So there will be further cuts to budgets like education across the board. And in our own advocacy, we insist that in trying to build state capacity, we are also advocating for efficient and effective use of money. And the Western Cape isn't a province that typically isn't able to allocate its money where it's needed most. What we've asked for, though, in these conversations is a consideration around equity in where you allocate funds, specifically around school safety. So targeting what Ziggy was calling those high-risk communities in particular, and then putting things in place in and around to make sure that infrastructure can in fact remain. We know that the money question and story is a big risk for all of us in the school community, and we play our part to civil society to monitor and support that work. Especially in relations to infrastructure and the fencing thing in particular. In our arsenal as Equal Education, because we are a social movement acting in public interest, we work and are supported by learners in the majority, but parents as well. So our parent members and structures also hold the responsibility of protecting schools in their immediate communities. And we've got the support of teachers and school staff. And so these reflections also come from people that are our duty bearers, for lack of a better word, in administering and supporting schools with safety programs. And so the point that we're trying to make is that the interventions, the trainings, the capacity, that's what's at minimal. And we're hoping that we can bolster those things inside a framework that still continues to use money effectively and efficiently. So we aren't always asking for more money, but rather what Nziki was saying, creative ideas to empower people in these committees to know what their role is, where to report, and have those systems in work. That's, I think, the most massive thing that we're trying to drive home here. The last is that from the school safety campaign, in its different recommendations, what learners have come back to us and said is that, look, whilst we're seeing progress around school perimeter fencing and access control, we do think that this one issue around psychosocial support still lacks in the majority, and they'd like us to sort of support or focus on that. So a public education campaign around psychosocial support is one of the things that Equal Education and its members want to focus on over the next bit. One of the things we've started asking ourselves is that a ratio of one counselor to about 20 schools is it's wholly insufficient. It's not going to be able to hold the weight of what our country and our province is experiencing at the moment. And we are trying, in support of the WCED, we've suggested this already though, but we're going to be doing some of this work ourselves, is creating a network of NGOs that can in fact support the department and schools more specifically with increased access to counselors, guidance counselors, psychologists and psychiatrists. So that's some of what we think could be a low-hanging fruit, and that can absolutely be held with the capacities of the department. And we'll do our best to support that as part of civil society.
Can I come in, Stace?
Sure, Nziki.
Yeah, I mean, there were a few questions around or rather comments around safety being also a community-based thing. We need community moral support around this. And I do want to say, I mean, part of our theory of change is not only to sort of challenge the government and hold the government accountable, writing submissions and all of that, but it's to also conscientize our communities to understand that they also have a role to play. And as being part of Equal Education, we have different structures within Equal Education, and our parents have been doing in different areas and a campaign called Working Bus, where they are accompanying learners going and coming back from school. And this campaign came out of the school safety campaign, understanding that it is not only the role of the school or the WCT to make sure that schools are safe, but also the community needs to come in place. And that's something that they've been doing in terms of responding to safety. And I think there was a question around, I think from member said around police and the safety around that, and the robberies and hijacks that are happening in schools. And equal education members, beyond just doing this provincial campaign, they also understand that when you speak about safety, you can't only maybe speak about it in one department, because I mean, the community is not safe. That means the school won't be safe. And they have directed sort of like campaign, school-based campaign, where they march into their nearest police stations to demand for police visibility going and coming back from school. But even that discussion went beyond that. It went beyond learners asking, okay, when we speak about police coming and going back from school, and which is part of the community, but also, do we want to allow police to come inside our schools? Are we not making schools to feel like a prison of some sort? But there's been initiative where learners have sort of like marched into nearest police stations to demand police to play a role in making sure there's the accompany of coming and going back from school is a way of making sure that learners are safe in communities. And I think there was another question around the not tailored of safety plans. And I mean, when we did our school visits, we went into different schools that around the Cape Metro. So we did schools around Kailicha, Nyanga, Guguletu, Miningback, Bontivo, and a lot of like the marginalized communities. And a lot of schools from Kailicha and these different areas didn't really have a tailored safety plans in their schools. So yeah.
Thank you, Nsiki. If I can just add on what Nsiki said about the role of SAPs at schools. So in addition to the school-based campaigns that a number of our learners take up, when I spoke about the school safety committee earlier, I mentioned that it is imperative that the school safety committees are able to partner with organizations in the area, as well as the South African Police Service. And we saw at some of these schools that there was a really good working relationship between the school principal and someone from the local SAPs who would come and sit in on these meetings, help with the development of safety plans, help the school with understanding the specific challenges that exist in the community so that they can be responsive to those and work proactively rather than reactively, and that they are properly, that they are in a place where they are not necessarily only, where they don't have any processes that they can follow following an immediate safety incident. And then also just to speak to Member Fry's question about the recommendations on, related to types of reported violence that we touched on in this presentation. And I will say that every one of our recommendations speaks to, improving the school, improving the school as a site of safety, as a site of a safe and resilient environment, to ensure that learners can learn effectively. But what we can't ignore is that learners come from these very communities where they are exposed to violence, they are exposed to safety threats, and oftentimes, this comes into schools with them in terms of how they may manage conflict, in terms of how they may relate to their peers. And Nsiki spoke quite extensively on the need for psychosocial support, and not necessarily only when something traumatic has happened, but support for these learners throughout their school journey so that they can become, participants and engaging in the classroom, effectively engage with their peers. So psychosocial support is definitely a recommendation that relates to that. Ensuring that, that school learners are aware of what is expected of them at the school level in terms of safety interventions, including the National School Safety Framework and the Safe Schools Program, which is the intervention by the WCED. And yeah, thank you very much. Do any of our other colleagues want to come in?
If not, Ms. Jacobs, then I can always take the next round of questions so long.
Thank you, Member Bartman.
No problem. What I do also think as a general, what might be also quite useful for us is if you are able to forward the raw data of the schools visited and what was found at each respective school as well. I think that would be quite useful because then we can assess what may have happened in the past 3 to 4 years since. For example, I know that there are school resource officers in some schools. I think there are 14 schools previously, and then there were 9 schools this year that were identified. The 9 schools this year, I think there were 3 in Khayelitsha, 1 in Westbank, 2 in Delft, and 2 in Philippi, where the particular schools were identified for extra school resource officers for safety, in addition to the 14. But perhaps if we have that type of raw data, maybe we can then say, okay, these schools are more at risk than others, perhaps, or the committee can assess where respective infrastructure matters need more attention than others, or perhaps where there are more psychosocial support services required at some schools than others. I see that the percentages are a bit of a mixed bag of results. So perhaps then instead of focusing on those schools where things were going well, we can try and zoom into that almost 20% approximately that you were referring to in some of the statistics. Member Brinke is first. Sorry, I see Member Brinke has put his hand down. That's why I'm seeing Member Syed's hand as number 1. Member Brinke, you may go ahead. Member Brinke, you must please unmute. Is Member Brinke still online? What happened now? Let me have a look here. Okay, I don't see him online anymore, so I'm going to go on to the next member so long. Member Syed and then Member Christians.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chair, I just wanted to get a sense. I mean, I heard the question from Member Christians regarding fencing. Could we get a rough estimation of the number of schools that are not in compliance with the school infrastructure laws and specific laws that are not complied with? And then based on that, in respect of the WCED's fencing project, which targeted 30 schools per year from 2019 to 2023, I want to check, is 30 schools enough in the perspective of equal education? And does equal education agree that the project should be a permanent feature for the department, notwithstanding some of the funding constraints, Chair? Thank you.
Thank you, Member Syed. We must also remember National Treasury is reviewing the education component currently of the provincial equitable share. So with my budget hat on, I'm very nervous about what National Treasury might be presenting to us later this year. Member Christians?
Chair, hence I said in the context of notwithstanding, but sorry, thanks.
Completely, but we await with bated breath, if I can say it like that. Member Christians?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to be long, and I also want to say thank you to the presenters of saying a couple of things, you know, that's helpful. Like, for instance, you know, we're sitting with psychosocial support that we need, and she spoke about, you know, NGOs and getting people involved from their side. The one encouraging thing is also that she mentioned they have quarterly reports, meetings with the WCED, and you know that is the way you know, with what's happening, you know, bringing everybody together and helping and assisting going forward, that will help. But I just need to also emphasize, Chair, I mean, the department always tells us, you know, their primary responsibility is to teach, you know, safety. They're doing all these extras because of, you know, part of their budget that should go for education, because I would want to see, and I think we all want to see the reduction of class sizes. You know, that for me, it's a big problem. But the department has now also, you know, embark on safety issues because our learners must be safe. So there's also that balance. You know, you can't. We will have to look at innovative ways how to reduce the risk of a learner. And I'm 100% with that. But I'm also saying, you know, because Department of Community Safety and SAPS and municipal, everybody's got a role to play. But the primary responsibility of education is to teach our children. And I'm worried about class sizes. So if we cut too much, you know, it's a balance that you must have. So I'm just saying, you know, I enjoy. What I appreciate from the presenters is also, listen, there's low-hanging fruit, as you said. How do we also look at the budgetary constraints, but also seeing how people can get involved, helping to secure that our learners are safe when they're in school, coming from school. So that is the type of discussions I think that are helpful going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. And what we could even do is previously in Budget Committee, what we did is we actually asked the Financial and Fiscal Commission to assist us with some calculations on questions that we had from the Budget Committee as to how we cost certain things. And for example, if we have, let's say, a psychologist in every school, we have approximately 1,500 schools in the province. So, you know, the first thing the question would be is, how do we cost that? And once we have costed that, where do we get the money? And then the balance that we would have to find is, how do we explain to schools that if you can't even necessarily find extra money to employ extra teachers, that how do you find that balance in order to provide extra funding for the extra matters? I think something we could also perhaps do is over and above asking the FFC to help us cost some of the information received, is we could ask maybe the Community Safety Committee, because I saw some of the violence and crime stats that we do need SAPS's help with. And I know Member Christian sits with me on community safety as well. And perhaps what we should do is we should ask the Community Safety Committee if we could perhaps have a joint meeting and call SAPS before the committee meeting to specifically ask how they are working with us and could work with us better even with regards to safety in schools. Something that we've also picked up on our respective committee oversight as the members is some of the schools that we've been at have very little parental involvement in the respective school. And that is very troubling to me when I see some of these statistics related to safety, because more and more teachers are these days required to be parents. They're required to be social workers and psychologists and pastors, and you know, it's everything under the sun. And that takes away from the teaching time that is part of their core mandate. I think mine was mostly relating to comments rather than specific questions. But Ms. Nonledo, Ms. Lulani, and Jacobs, you can allocate the questions where relevant. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Nonledo?
I wondered if I just want to talk to the question around where the schools, how the intervention, and then pass it to Elizabeth to start on the budget question. I think okay, I think on the question around how many schools in the Western Cape are in fact infringing on that sort of law and have issues around perimeter and fencing and access control, we won't be able to answer that question. But we can support the WCED and this committee with fact finding on that. We don't have just the capacity and infrastructure to reach all of these schools. I think it'd be quicker if we all did it together. The other thing that can be done is asking if the WCED can in fact share with us their findings or the status of that risk assessment tool that's been filled in by schools across the board. In our own engagements with schools, we found that they struggled with understanding what it's asking of them and or completing it adequately, but maybe it's the best thing that we've got right now. We did in the last meeting with the WCED also offer ourselves to take this report to different circuits and see if circuit manager and their staff, as people that directly support schooling staff and teachers, could maybe one way of starting this conversation and building capacity and upskilling and training members of schools that are involved in the school safety sort of response and plans. So that's as far as we can support right now. But if there's a commitment to do this together, then we can absolutely be of support. Liz, will you please come in?
Sure. Good afternoon, Chair and members. Well, perhaps two things from me, really. So when often we are discussing issues that affect school communities, we tend to overly focus on the pedagogical. So the department's primary mandate is to educate, right? But increasingly, we are seeing that the environmental or the physical environment and the conditions thereof and the climate also impact the pedagogical. So overly investing in, teaching and learning materials, teachers, classrooms, and neglecting the conditions within which teaching and learning actually takes place is essentially taking maybe 2 steps forwards and a couple back as well. So I think these things are not mutually exclusive. They go together in ensuring that immediately realizable right, which is quality basic education, is ensured and it's enjoyed by all and not some. So the money story, it comes up in every aspect, every line item. When you ask for more chairs, where's the money going to come from? When you ask for school nutrition, where's the money going to come from? So essentially, the conversation always drives back to there's not enough funding to do anything. And what we are asking for here is not necessarily to rob Peter to pay Paul, and is that we need to look at the school environment and learners' experiences holistically in deciding how we divvy up the finances. And we don't make these recommendations in isolation or without the bigger picture in mind. We are making the recommendations to the WCED, the same recommendations to your honorable selves, and we are also tackling these recommendations from a budgetary perspective. And so what we are asking for here is that if there's willingness and there's willpower from the department to be able to implement some of these interventions that we are proposing, then our recommendations to Treasury and the powers that be to also increase budget education allocations in line with inflation, so that education departments are able to provide the services that learners need to be able to enjoy that constitutional right to quality education. So we are mindful and we are well aware that there's always going to be a money story, but most of these recommendations are not necessarily new or novel or something that we are pulling out of thin air. They're like literally bare minimum or basic requirements that should have been done already or should be in the process of being done. So when we talk about, for instance, school fencing or perimeter fencing, this is nothing new. In the school infrastructure law, which was promulgated in 2013, these are made allocation, these are specifically listed there. Therefore, education departments should have plans in place backed by budget to be able to make sure that schools are all safe in terms of infrastructure, physical infrastructure. And we don't mean just having a fence for fence sake, but they meet the necessary requirement. Therefore, we are not wasting the money that we are using to put up the fences. So in a nutshell, we cannot address everything in once. It takes some years and processes to be able to get what we're asking for. And without the relationship, information sharing, dialogue, we will not be able to see where the bottlenecks are. And when we are making our recommendations in different spaces like the Standing Committee on Finance Appropriation, we might not be hitting where it's supposed to land, right? So there's room for improvement in terms of the relationship. Regarding information sharing and the raw data, that is no problem. There's no secrecy in this regard. We are happy to furnish the committee with whatever information that we have at our disposal and you know, clarify any questions they might have in that regard. But I think what we're asking for is that the education departments actually do what is required of them or what they are mandated to do and what they've committed themselves to do in the various policies, and not necessarily say that because this is a societal issue, it is just too big, there's nothing we can do, and then, you know, throw our hands in the air. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ms. Baini. I just want to check if there's any other input still. I do think that some of these items that the members can also, that we can deal with them in resolutions or even make recommendations for the upcoming division of revenue adjustment even, where members can make proposals as to how national funding should go to provinces and what the funding should go for. I think I saw Ms. Jacobs' purple bubble.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. That is all from, there's nothing more from my side. And if there are any other inputs from my colleagues, perhaps they could come in now.
I'm feeling captured. Thanks, Des.
I'm also captured. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you so much. I see Mr. Mayer's hand online. You may go ahead. I didn't expect you to be online in the meeting, but welcome.
Apologies, Chair. That's what I'm just wanting to check. Will we be given an opportunity to reply to the presentation of equal education to the committee?
Not today. What we're going to do is we're going to get all of the information, especially the raw data, so that we can see where you need to assist us with, where we need to figure things out. Because at the moment, the presentation speaks to this 40 and the respective statistics, but I do think, Gage, if there's something specific that you wish to reply on right now, you're more than welcome. But I didn't see any of the specific school names, for example, in the presentation, so I'm not sure how well prepared you would be able to be to reply right now.
That's the point, Chair. We had engaged yesterday and we have made the exact same request as what you have made. So let's wait for that until we get that information and we'll come back and explain. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Thank you so much. Member Syed?
No, Chair, just on that one, before I get to if there's going to be another round for us, I'd like to ask another question or two more questions. Will there be another round, Chair?
We are at 2:30 and we do have another presentation. Would it be possible for you to put your question into writing, perhaps in our resolution at the end?
Although it's just one. I'm not going to be. I mean, I understand the issue of writing, but I think this one doesn't require them to really give too much of technical response.
No problem. Sure. Go ahead, but if we can just please keep it short, because our next presentation is regarding learners with severe disabilities.
I'll keep it very short. Chair, just my question here would be around the assessment of how effective is Safe Schools call center and the response time, right? What kind of issues were reported to it, and is there any recommendations they can give for safe schools to improve in the way in which it responds to things? Thank you. And then I want to welcome the input that you've said around the Department of Education to be able to respond once they've got all the information. But perhaps if Mr. Mayor at the end just wants to say something, I don't see that there's any harm in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Said. I did at the end ask if there's something specific Mr. Mayor would like to give input on, and he did indicate that they'll wait for the respective information so that they are able to deal with the specific cases. But not Ledo, I'm not sure who will be taking Member Said's question.
Stacey, you can go ahead. I wonder if you could share screen again if we've got like 90 seconds, because we did run a reflection on that call center.
I'm sure, Sedo. Oh, sorry. So let me just begin by saying that, excuse me, that we saw that most learners at these schools were not aware of the Safe Schools call center, and nor did they make calls. I mean, the WCD's own data shows that you know, only 0.1% of the over 5,000 calls that were made to the call center between 2019 and 2020 were placed by learners themselves. And just in terms of, you know, what remedies there are in order to get in order to increase awareness about this, we spoke in our recommendations around, you know, speaking in school assemblies, or the WCED coming to school assemblies and sharing information on the use of the Safe Schools call center, what its purpose is, how it can help learners in these situations, as well as through you know, provision of stationery, for example, which is something that, you know, you can have the number printed on a ruler or a pen that learners have access to, and will always have the Safe Schools call center number on it. You know, we will welcome that it is a toll-free number, and learners are able to, you know, with it being a toll-free number, any learner with a device will be able to report an incident to this call center. And just in terms, again, to remind members on the call about the types of issues that certain schools, the types of challenges certain schools faced when they reported an incident, was that, you know, there were high call volumes. You know, at times there were high call volumes to the call center, and oftentimes principals would get frustrated. The principals mentioned that they would get frustrated in waiting for in waiting for some time to be addressed, and that also feedback to the problems that they did manage to successfully report was not always timely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Member Side, I'm going to ask that if you have any follow-ups on that regard, that we do deal with them in resolutions. I'm a little bit concerned that we will be running into the time for the second session.
Yeah. No,
of
it's
today.
fine. I don't have any. Thanks.
No problem. I just want to say thank you to the Equal Education team for joining us today for this presentation. It does assist us when we have statistics like this in front of us. It does assist the committee members to bolster where we are not able to go to a particular school. We frequently go on oversights, both unannounced and announced. But even if we had to, you know, use every slot for an oversight visit to respective schools, I highly doubt we'll be able to get to every single school within a term. So this type of information really does assist us. And I thank you guys for being able to present this to us today. But with that, if you have any other day-to-day business, you're welcome to leave the meeting. Otherwise, you're also welcome to listen in on the next presentation.
Thank you so much, Chairperson, and thank you to all members of the committee for giving us this opportunity to present the safety in Goku.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Gratitude. Thank you.
And with that, I think one of my favorites are up now. Mr. Naika, are you still online? Are you joining us still?
Yes, I'm here, Chairperson. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to the members. We have a presentation as requested from a previous engagement to the Standing Committee around learners with severe learning challenges, severe disabilities, and my colleague will make that presentation. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to ask Ms. Jacobs if you can just unshare your screen. And then Ms. Daniels, welcome. If you can just share yours and put it into slideshow. And then just for context, we have had an inclusive education presentation from this unit before. So this is the committee delving a little bit deeper into some of the subtopics within the respective unit. Thank you so much. Mr. Naika and Ms. Daniels, over to you.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and all present. I am going to be doing the presentation, but I also want to inform you that I have members of my team present if there are any detailed questions that I'm not able to answer. Should I start, Chairperson?
Perfect, you may go ahead. Similarly, we'll only deal with questions afterwards.
Okay. All right, so we were asked to speak about learners with severe disabilities. And I thought I'd start by showing you the picture of special schools nationally. If you have a look at the Western Cape, you will see that the special schools are clustered around the metro area, and then a few in the Worcester area, and dotted in the rest of the districts. And if you look at the picture for the rest of the country, similarly, special schools mostly found in the urban areas. So having said that, do all children with disabilities need to go to a special school? We're moving to a system where we look at levels of support rather than just the medical diagnosis. So on the left-hand side, you will see the different categories of disability: deaf, blind, cerebral palsied, physically disabled, specific learning disability, moderate cognitive impairment, severe cognitive impairment, also now profound cognitive impairment, where we also provide support, autism spectrum disorder, and severe behavior challenges. So we do an assessment to discover what level of support does the learner need. So you could have cerebral palsy and need a low level of support, or you could have cerebral palsy and need high levels of support. We further break it down into what kind of support is it that you need. If you need low-level specialist support, that could be in an ordinary school from a learning support or remedial teacher. Perhaps you need curriculum and assessment adaptation, extra time, a reader or a scribe that can be provided in an ordinary school or mainstream classroom. Specialized learning and teaching support material. Perhaps you need enlarged font in your reading material, infrastructure and other resources to ensure access. Perhaps it's a ramp that is needed if you're in a wheelchair. Or sometimes it might just be training of the staff at the ordinary school in order for them to know how to deal with your support need. So that is low. And then moderate, we say it can often be found in a full service school, full service inclusive school, and that could include some support from the inclusive education multidisciplinary team. There's usually a psychologist, a therapist, a special education teacher as part of the team. And then high support is what is available in our special schools. The specialist support could be weekly, sometimes daily, quite extensive curriculum and assessment adaptations, likewise with LTSM, and even in the special schools, there might also need to be training and orientation of the staff. So we wondered whether, when we got the request, whether it was, what kind of support do we give to learners who are in that high category, or whether you wanted to know more about those with severe cognitive impairment. And we decided, let's talk about both. So that's what we're going to do. All right, so the full service schools are the schools in between an ordinary and a full service school. They're still ordinary mainstream schools, but they have support from a special school resource center, which has an outreach team, and they also receive money for adapted LTSM, perhaps infrastructure changes, etc. And you can see that we're making good progress with the establishment of full service schools. If you look at the Western Cape, you can see there's much more of a spread compared to the spread of special schools. And these schools would be equipped to cater for low to moderate support needs, leaving the places in the special schools for learners with high support needs. In terms of, I'm now going to talk about learners with severe intellectual disabilities. The schools in the Western Cape that cater for learners with severe intellectual disabilities, we've organized it per district. We have the 8 districts, and you can have a look and see the schools in the different districts. Overberg is our smallest district. We only have 3 circuits in the Overberg district, and then our larger districts have up to 10 circuits. So you can see the distribution there of the schools catering for learners with severe intellectual disabilities. How do they get placed in such a school? So it's not like the public ordinary schools where parents or caregivers apply directly to the school. Learners are usually identified in the ordinary schools, or sometimes by medical practitioners at our hospitals or private clinics. And they are then assessed through the CIAS protocol, and CIAS stands for Screening, Identification, Assessment and Support. The applications for placement at a special school are presented at a quarterly learner sifting or placement meeting, where there is a team which comprises representatives from the school, from the district, and from head office, would look at the application and determine whether there is indeed a need for placement at a special school. If not, the learner would be referred to the district, where support would be put in place either at the ordinary school or sometimes at a full service school. Because there's extra funding involved in placing a learner at a special school, the delegation to sign off on these placements is with the Director of Inclusive and Specialized Education Support. But we do have program managers that are the proxy of the director, who sit in on the meetings, and the program managers, some of them are in the meeting today. So Dina Archery is our program manager for schools for severe intellectual disability. And then we also have Shannon Potgieter, who's the acting program manager for children with profound intellectual disability. And the manager of our special school program managers is Ms. Rhoda Manuel. They are in the meeting with me today. Then just to explain to all present here today that there is now a draft curriculum for these learners with severe intellectual disabilities. So the core subjects that they do, and they do grade R to grade 5, they spend a longer period of time getting through the work. So you can see by age 18, they would achieve the equivalent of a grade 5 level education. The academic subjects that are offered are home language, mathematics, life skills, and that includes creative arts and physical education. But more emphasis is placed on the skill subjects, and that's offered from grade 4 to 5 when the learners are 14 to 18 years of age, and the school can choose from an array of skill subjects, including agricultural studies, arts and crafts, maintenance, motor mechanics, plumbing, woodworking and timber, etc. But of course, at a lower level than at the School of Skills or in a TVET college. The allocation and utilization of instruction time in the skill subjects. So most of the time, 80% of the time, would be spent on the practical component of the skill subject and 20% on the theory related to the practical component. So what are the general aims of this adapted curriculum? Well, it provides for the learners' diverse needs. It exposes learners to a wide variety of useful skills required in the labour market, and I'll give you some examples of those in a moment. It gives more opportunities for learners to be employable. It allows for the development of the learner's personality, talent, creativity, mental and physical abilities, develops their human potential, their dignity and self-worth. So just because they can't get to an academic grade 12, there are things that they are able to do, and these abilities need to be developed so that they can become contributing citizens in their communities. So this curriculum was piloted from 2018 in all schools catering for learners with severe intellectual disabilities. The content is aligned to the foundation and intermediate phase of the National Curriculum Statement, but at a more applied and functional level according to the learner's age, interest and aptitude. It is below the National Qualifications Framework Level 1, so there's no qualification attached, but the learners do obtain a statement of achievement on completion of the program. So here you see examples of the kind of skills that the learners are involved with. You see bead making, you see woodworking, pottery, gardening, etc. So we also have exit plans for these learners, and there's job shadowing programs which are initiated by the schools, where the therapists and educators assess the learners and their skills aptitude. They assist learners in preparing quite simple CVs and portfolios for when they leave school. Learners are linked to local businesses, NGOs, etc. for job shadowing and work skills experience. The occupational therapists and educators monitor the learners weekly at their respective workplaces to facilitate a smooth transition. And learners gain employment often at some of these businesses where they've done the job shadowing. There are also sheltered and protective workshops for those who cannot work in the open labour market. And once again, the school and the occupational therapists guide parents with securing placement at these protective workshops. At the protective workshops, the learners continue with further learning and skills development. So some successes and exit plans for learners with severe intellectual disability. There you see Onalo, who's a security guard, Henry, gardener, and groundsman at the school he attended, Blowfly School. Keenan, who is employed at Chekan Skill Center in Grassy Park. And then we didn't have a picture for Anzel and Shaheen. Anzel works for a tire company and started out working at a tire company and now works for Renault as a vehicle panel beater. Shaheen was a gardener groundsman at Volskut Primary School, and now he's employed at Checkers as a shelf packer. And then we have a partnership with Job Able, which is an online platform for job seekers, and many learners have been have obtained jobs and are currently employed at various McDonald's, KFC, and other businesses via the job-abled online platform. And I'm also going to speak about profound intellectual disabilities, which also often require a high level of support. So there's also a learning program for learners with profound intellectual disability. 3 subjects as such: life skills, language and communication, mathematics. And this curriculum or learning program expands the learners' opportunities to attain skills, acquire knowledge and develop attitudes and values across the curriculum. When the learners start with the program, many of them are in the awareness group. They often have quite severe physical and visual impairments. Yeah, many of them also have physical disabilities, and they would be classified into various levels. So level 1 is walking without limitation, up to level 5, transported in a manual wheelchair. So those various assistive devices that you see on the top would be provided according to the learner's physical needs. Overall, in our special care centres, you can see the proportion of learners who are mobile, 61%, those who need some assistance and using those assistive devices, 17%, and those who are immobile, like the learner in the previous picture, about 20% on average of the learners fall into that category. We provide learning and teaching support material and assistive devices, and there are some examples of the LTSM and assistive devices that are provided to these learners. Great provincial development. Earlier this year, our MEC Mania made a bid for us to receive more money for special needs education, and we were given an additional 135 million, which is going to be used to open 2 new special needs schools. Although, as you could tell from earlier slides, we are focusing more and more on transforming ordinary schools into full service inclusive schools, but there is still a need in some areas and with certain categories of disability with very high support needs for high support special needs schools. Adding 28 classrooms to existing special or full service inclusive schools. Also extra teachers, extra classroom assistants and therapists for the new schools and classrooms. Then integration of learners with profound intellectual disability into the schooling system. The additional 67 million rand budget for the 2023-2024 financial year is being utilized to make provision for the integration of more of these learners with profound intellectual disabilities into schools. And this includes provision of classrooms, teachers and support staff, LTSM and the necessary adaptations such as nappy changing stations for some of the learners, for transport and for norms and standards for this category of learners. So with this presentation, our intention was to give you an overview of what is available for learners with severe disabilities, but also to indicate that the system that we use now is to categorize into levels of support that is needed. So I hope that this answers some of your questions, and this is where we want to get to, an inclusive society where everyone feels valued and where support needs are addressed so that every learner can reach their potential. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Daniels. Members, I'm going to take questions now. I could see hands. Member Christians. I don't see any other hands, so then Member Christians, and then I'll post mine after yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. You know what, I'm very happy to see that. I know that, you know, the draft curriculum, and also looking at, you know, empower the intellectual disabilities more, people with intellectual disabilities. Just, you know, I've just heard, you know, you have a statement of performance, so you don't have the NQF level 1, don't have that. So my question is, you know, is that a disadvantage now because, you know, you have you apply and you have the statement of performance, but you don't have a grade, and I know it's extremely difficult to put it in grade order. And that's why I'm glad that you also said that there's an online platform, Job Able. So, you know, I know you're spending a lot of money getting our learners to, at least with intellectual disabilities, to try to get them skilled and get them accepted and get them into the workplace. So my question is, you know, you don't have a valid qualification if you now go and become a packer, or you go work at those places. So when you apply, you're at a disadvantage because you don't have that formal qualification. I wonder how a person can assist, because the department put all the money into getting the learner equipped. Now the learner's equipped, he wants to go into the workplace to play a vital role into society and be accepted in society. But then you have this disadvantage that you will always, you know, not be on par with somebody that have a formal course. I don't know the answer, but I'm just throwing that out. All this money goes into develop and helping our learners with intellectual disabilities. But I don't know, you know, when that investment is made, you want some return on that investment. And I don't know, the question also is, what is the number of learners that actually get employed after they've gone through, you know, all these skills developments? What is the percentage of learners being accommodated in workplaces after they completed this? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. My questions relate also to the empowerment aspect. First, I wanted to find out how many learners are in the job shadowing program that you mentioned. Secondly, regarding the Jobs Abled platform, how many learners have been placed in jobs via this particular Jobs Abled platform? And then, apologies. Okay, and then third, other than taking a specific subject, are the learners able to learn entrepreneurial skills? Our economy currently is really held up by small, medium, and micro enterprises, and we are constantly searching for ways to create an environment that creates jobs. So if there are perhaps entrepreneurial skills that are being taught to these learners, then it is not just searching for a job, but possibly even creating a job for yourself in the current economic environment. But yes, I think I'll stick to those three for now, and I'll see how the next round goes. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairperson. I'm wanting to share a few slides which I'll talk to, and I hope as I do that it might answer some of the questions that have been asked by Member Christians and yourself. May I do that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so what we are trying to do in this country is to implement the three-stream model of education, because not all children, particularly those with intellectual disabilities, are able to get to academic grade 12. So just some of you may know this, but just let me go through the 3 streams. It's the academic stream up to grade 12, technical vocational stream up to grade 12, with technical subjects in grade 10, 11, and 12. And then the stream that we will be mostly talking about now is the technical occupational stream. So I just want to go through that. So that's the technical vocational. As I mentioned, it goes up to grade 12, but the occupational stream is for our School of Skills learners who are functioning at a higher cognitive level than the severe intellectual disability. That would go up to the equivalent of grade 8 and 9 in the GET band, and eventually if the learners complete the 4 years of the program, they would get an NQF level 1 qualification. But these are for learners with moderate intellectual impairment. So just by way of a diagram, you can see on the right-hand side there, the technical occupational stream. The learners would exit the primary school either at grade 6 or grade 7 level. Often they have repeated grade 7. And then you see that green arrow that goes across. They would then do the technical occupational year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4. And then we hope quite soon there would be a general education certificate that would be awarded to these learners. And then they could either go into occupation-specific training, perhaps as a mechanic, bricklayer, or they could go on to a TVET college or to the world of work. So those are the learners with mild to moderate intellectual impairment. But the learners we're talking about today are the learners in that green block at the bottom, and they have quite significant intellectual impairment. So if you look at the middle of that block there, they only get to grade, the equivalent of grade 1 level when they are about, let's say, about 12, 13, 14 years old, and eventually they would get to the equivalent of grade 5, which is just below NQF level 1. So I hope that explains it. We're talking about learners with significant cognitive impairment, and there hasn't been a curriculum for them before. So this differentiated CAPS, or CAPS for severe intellectual disability, has been developed quite recently. So more and more learners now are getting into the job markets, having done the curriculum for SID. I'm not sure on the numbers of learners that are employed, but we can certainly find that out. I'm going to ask Mr. Dino Archery in a moment if he has an estimate of numbers of learners finding employment. But I want to say that before we had this curriculum, very, very few of these learners would get into open labor market employment. The majority, if they were able to find place, would go to a protected workshop. So it's quite an achievement now for these learners to get into the open labor market. And likewise with job abled, the platform, I'm just going to hear from Mr. Archery whether he would be able to get us that percentage of learners who apply on the platform and the ones who get placement. Don't think we will have it at hand. And then entrepreneurial skills, Chair, you asked about that. So in the technical occupational curriculum, that is certainly something that is covered. And I can ask Ms. Rhoda Manuel, who used to be the School of Skills Program Manager, just to tell us the extent to which that is covered in the technical occupational curriculum. Just check. Oh, this just shows the articulation between the different streams, but I think I've spoken to that already. Thanks, Chairperson. Could I ask Mr. Archery just to talk about the curriculum for SID and the employability? Mr. Archery.
Thank you, Ms. Janice. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. Yes, unfortunately, I won't be able to give you numbers at this point in time of the number of learners that have been employed within this sector, but I'll definitely be able to get the data through to the colleagues. With the Job Jack or the Job Able platform, I should be able to get data as well from them, because it's an online platform. We will be able to retrieve the data quite easily there. But I must say, during my visits to the schools, my principals have are always reporting on the number of learners that are getting employment when they leave their schools, which is quite encouraging. And so for this year, they are all going to provide, by the end of the year, provide me with an exit plan for each of our learners to show us where they are going to be employed in the years to come. As far as the entrepreneurial skills are concerned, it is embedded within the curriculum itself. So besides the skills, the technical skills that the learners are taught, they're also taught entrepreneurial skills as well. So they have their normal, the flea markets at school where parents are invited. In many cases, the learners man the tables, and so they are taught the entrepreneurial skills within those programs. So yeah, I don't know if I've answered the question there, colleagues. Thank you.
Chairperson, I'm also going to ask Ms. Manuel. She's got some statistics of the School of Skills employment. We did a survey last year for the MEC, so if she could show that, please.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, honourable members, and also good afternoon to all guests and our WCED colleagues. I hope that you can see the pie graph on the screen. Maybe just to clarify, in terms of the learners with intellectual disabilities, Mrs. Daniels presented on our learners with severe intellectual disabilities and our learners with profound intellectual disabilities. So the category, I think, where some of the questions are relating to would be to our learners with mild intellectual disabilities. And especially these three categories are categories that where the curriculum was written at DBE level. It started in 2014, and the curriculum, an adapted curriculum, was specifically written for learners in these three categories of disabilities. And so if we had known, we could have added the MID, because it looks like the questions of employability and entrepreneurship and all of that, it relates widely to our School of Skills learners and our learners with mild intellectual disabilities. So how the program works is the learning program itself is written for the PID learner, right? So that's the profound intellectual disability. Then you have a program that's written for grade R to 5, which is the severe intellectual disability. And then picking up from that program is the program that is written for the learners with mild intellectual disability, and that is from grade 6 to grade 9. And that is where the School of Skills are located. So within the School of Skills sector, we focus a lot of our energies on the learners staying with us for 4 years. These are learners who would ultimately go to the street, go to the gangs, if we don't get them to join us, get them off the streets. So they stay with us for 4 years, and the last year of that 4-year period is crucial, because embedded, especially into their life skills program, is preparation for the world of work. All of those entrepreneurial skills, they do it from the start already. So they spend 50% of their time doing academics and the other 50% doing skills training. So they are making models, they are making braai stands, they are making fireplaces, they are making all kinds of things for the duration of their 4 years. They are selling it to parents, open days, to teachers, to visitors. And the lovely thing is that we've encouraged these schools to have partnerships with industry. I was asked in 2022 Minister David Manier had just started and wanted to know more about the School of Skills. And after meeting with him, he asked me to go away and find out how many of the learners of the previous year were actually employed. And bearing in mind that in 2021, our learners missed out quite a lot in terms of the pandemic, in terms of COVID. But the stats that you see on the screen were stats that I was able to gather from our schools in 2022. So these are learners who finished their 4 years in December 2021 at the School of Skills. And so for us, given the period that this was, I suppose it's subjective how you look at it, but I can honestly say that to us, this meant a lot. The fact that 33% of learners who exited the School of Skills in year 4 in 2021 were actually employed with companies. And then there were some learners who went into the TVET colleges who pursued further studies in 2022. Those are the learners in red, 12%. Alarming and yes, a cause for concern are the number of learners that were at home in that year who didn't get anything, 37%. And then because these learners left in December and, you know, when I approached them in 2022, this was, I think, June, July, some of them weren't sure what happened to some of the learners that they have at the school. So 18% were unknown. So this just gives you, I think, a snapshot. We would need to do a survey again for more recent information. But I can honestly say that we were very chuffed and very impressed with the stats that was gathered in 2022. So that's my contribution. Thank you very much.
Chairperson, can I add? Chairperson?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, I'll encourage the chairperson and members to look at the JobAble website. And so they have a 70% success rate in terms of employing learners. And they after they employ those learners, about 25 to 30 drop out. So, and then with the School of Skills program, you know, many of these children come from very challenging backgrounds, and they have severe or quite serious developmental lags in their development. And so it could be a large number of them have emotional maturity challenges as well. But if you visit the schools, you'll see that they become skilled in certain areas of work. You know, as Ms. Manuel mentioned, it's actually quite an incredible intervention in the system. And so, you know, if you ever have time, it may be a good idea to go to Wellington School of Skills or Mitchell's Plains School of Skills. And so this morning we had a discussion with the person involved in hospitality, and there is such a big demand for chefs that came out of the Mitchell's Plains School. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to have a provincial-wide program in hospitality where we mobilize all the schools and link the young people up with institutions that can employ them. So they'll be going to school and they'll be going to these institutions and they will get jobs. Most of them do. And so the alternative is something that we don't want to contemplate. Given the challenges and the intervention, you know, we as a department, we are extremely pleased with the way these schools perform. And so if you look at the JobAble program and you load those more and more pictures on that program, you'll find the number of people that have actually got employment. It's actually quite extraordinary. If you look at the mainstream unemployment rate, it's actually quite an achievement, I think. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much. Members, I'm going to open up for another round of questions. If there are none, Mr. Naik, I'm trying to find in my notes now, but I remember when we were in the economic development cluster in the West Coast, I think it was last year in the beginning of the year for ISOPA or the year before that, one of the board members for the South African chef, industry and association works with, I think it is the Saldanha hub of some sort, where they have entrepreneurship skills. I'm just trying to find the information for you, but I'll get it offline for you. And something that he also mentioned was that, interestingly enough, it's especially up the West Coast, they are desperately in need of persons going into the hospitality sector due to the level of investment that is coming into the area. And sometimes people forget that when that infrastructure is being built, when the investment comes, people still need to eat. And we forget about those secondary and third sectors that are linked to those particular type of developments. I know the Saldanha Bay IDZ CEO also mentioned that when they were busy putting the Freeport together, one of the biggest challenges they had was not to do with the infrastructure, but with getting secondary and tertiary type of suppliers for the companies that they are hosting, such as catering, for example, in the area, or laundry, or personal services for persons. So I find that quite interesting, and how one could partner with that particular sector, especially since tourism is one of the top 3 economic sectors within our province. Members, are there any other questions?
Thank you, Chairperson. I'll ask, I'll have a chat with Mrs. Daniels and Mrs. Manuel, and we'll follow the Saldanha issue up, because I think, we, as I mentioned, we have this plan with getting the hospitality section mobilized across the province, and so we'll link up with that. Thank you so much.
Yes, I speak to Ms. Kashifa Beekers, the CEO, to see what are the different types of opportunities. I know they also partner with the TVET college in that area, because some of my students from my constituency apply to that particular college for energy programs. But I know they also have particular hospitality that they slot in with. And perhaps she might even know what those particular contact details may be. Or even the mayor.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much. But with that, if there are no questions, then I'll excuse the officials then for the rest of the day to go about their day-to-day business. And I'll just please ask the members to just stay online. But thank you so much for your presentation. We really do appreciate it, especially with the extra information flowing from the previous presentation.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. I hope you have a lovely day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Chairperson and members.
Members, please do stay online for the administration part. Okay. Members, I'll now open up for resolutions first before we go over to the minutes. Ms. Hassan Musa, I just want to check if you've captured any specifics before I open up for members just to put their particular questions for resolutions.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, through you. One of it is to request the raw data from Equal Education in respect of the schools visited in the report, what was found at each school, etc., to provide that raw data to the committee. Another one was for the committee to have a joint meeting with community safety and request SAPS to brief them on the working together with WCED towards school safety at all the schools in the Western Cape. I've also captured with the last presentation, and also to provide Member Christian's asked for it, and WCED's officials indicated that they can provide the number of learners employed in the sectors and which sectors to provide that data to the committee. If there's anything else that I missed out on, I'll take it now.
The jobs one, that was on the second presentation, right?
Yes, Chair.
Okay. And then just I asked if we could maybe ask the FFC if they could assist us with costing how much it would cost for us to provide schools with a psychologist and a social worker. Because if we can get that costing, then we can lobby DBE to say, listen here, this is how much it would cost, and we can compare that to how many schools do have and how many schools don't have, to be able to then try to work from or start working from such a calculation.
Got that one, Chair.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, is there any resolutions that we have missed? I think
Chair,
the
I just
one
wanna-
on supporting the schools on the school safety committees and ensuring that they are established are quite straightforward. Unless members have alternative views on that one.
Chair, if we can just throw in one or two, and then we can just look at that.
No
If I
problem.
can just throw in one
Christians.
and two. Yeah, the one thing that it's well, and I'm just saying this now in this fashion, but it's well and done for Equal Education to say the things that they are saying. But they also said now, they will engage NGOs for counselors to assist at schools. I think we must also ask them, how far, because, they point out stuff and they can help us with certain things. And maybe we must just check how do we, navigate that. Also that they just don't say stuff, but that they're also accountable for what they say to help the safety measure at the school. So I just thought, but I also then thought that quarterly meetings that they have with the WCD, can we get the minutes of that meeting? Is it possible to get the minutes if it's possible? Because then we also, knowing what they're saying and between the department and Equal Education. Because I just, we got all this stuff now, and there's no ways, like I said, that there's budget for these things, but there's some good stuff. But maybe, like they said, there's no budgets involved. So if we look at the school safety committees, the figures and the stats they gave, that is, make sure that schools have. So maybe we must ask the department how many schools have safety committees and what is functional and not functional. Stuff that we can do, and, that there's no budget implications on those type of things. I'm just thinking, I don't want to come to a meeting again and they give all of these stuff and there was no progress on it. So that is the thinking that I have relating to that.
I think I had the same concern regarding we need progress on certain matters. So that's why I suggested that we do the raw data so that we can get the specifics, and so that one can then delve into what can be fixed immediately, what is more medium term, what is more long term. And in terms of the budgetary matter, that's why I suggested perhaps we rope the FFC in to assist us with that costing measures, because one thing that the FFC is very, very good at is that technical analysis. But the FFC is also a constitutional body that is mandated in terms of the Constitution. They must provide provinces with financial advice when they are asked on such things such as money bill and technical financial matters. And I do think in the Western Cape we have a very good relationship with the FFC in terms of asking them for assistance with independent analysis that doesn't come from provincial treasuries, so that we can assist with finding innovative ways to try and deal with these matters given the financial constraints that we face, especially with the division of revenue coming up, because if we can possibly even get that type of information beforehand, it might assist us in engaging in the division of revenue adjustment bill even better in the end of the year.
Agree, Chair, agree. I 100% agree.
Perfect. And then, you know, you asked for the school safety committees that are established and those who are not established, so that we can try and figure out what the problems are there. And the list of, well, not the list of NGOs, but you say asking for to accept the assistance to try and figure out what the network of NGOs are to support schools and how they can work with the WCED. I think Ms. Hassan Musa might need to help me with her fancy English there.
Will do, Chair.
Okay. Is there anything else, colleagues? There was a suggestion also from Mr. Naika that we visit the Wellington School of Skills or Mitchell's Plain School of Skills. I'm not sure how many education slots we have left for the year, given that we are now going into full stream annual report and adjustment budget season. But that might be something for the committee to contemplate, should we get an extra slot.
Agree, Chair. Agree with that.
Okay. I don't have anything else from my side. Is there anything else from member side?
I've given my list.
I'm
I
good,
don't know who's
thank
the other.
you.
I've
Okay,
covered,
perfect.
Chair.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Ms. Hassan Musa, you can then put up our first set of minutes then. Perfect. So this is 13th of June. So I'll just start on page 1. Okay, page 2. Yeah, so that meeting was an administrative meeting for our respective reports. If there are no edits, if I could get a mover for the report.
I so move.
Thank you. If I could get a seconder for the report.
Second, Chair.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, the minutes are so adopted. The second set of minutes. That is for the 15th of August. If you could just check our attendance there. Okay, and then we can go down to, yes, that's page 1. Okay, page 2. Perfect. That's the end of page 2. If I could get a mover for the minutes.
I so move.
Thank you so much. If I could get a seconder for the minutes. Members, are you awake?
I'm still awake, ma'am.
Okay,
Chair,
I
I wasn't in that meeting. I can't second. I wasn't in that
Were you
meeting.
not in that meeting? Oh, sorry.
No, I was apology on that meeting. Yeah.
Let's quickly see. I can second the minutes, but it's not usual for me to second the minutes. Let me quickly see who was in that meeting. Ms. Hassan Musa, we just put it back up quickly for us to see. I see member Brinkhuis is also back in the meeting. Ms. Hassan, yes, Ms. Hassan Musa?
Chair, can I just give some advice? We need one member to agree to the minutes that they are a true reflection of it. You are the other member because you are the chair as well as a member of the committee. So you can give a true reflection that that was what happened in the minutes in the meeting.
No problem.
I'm
happy to second. That's okay. I'm happy to second if others were not maybe in that meeting. Okay, perfect. And the minutes are so adopted. Ms. Hassan Musa, is there anything else that I need to remember that I've maybe forgotten about?
Chair, just a reminder of next week's meeting, which is an oversight visit to the district office of the Metro Central District Office.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Hassan Musa, and you'll obviously send us those respective logistics for the members. Perfect.
That's correct.
And that, yes, and that also stems from our previous resolutions in this regard. But colleagues, with that, that is then the end of the meeting. I hope you have a lovely afternoon further and a lovely week. And as the respective annual reports get ATC'd, I hope you have a happy reading time before the tabling of the annual report season. Ms. Hassan
Thank you,
Musa, your
Chair.
hand is
Bye-bye.
up. Is that an urgent thing we must remember quickly?
Yes, just regarding the annual report, it has been moved to the 20th and not the 13th of October. I have not sent out the notice for that, but just so that the members are aware of it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. With that, colleagues, the meeting is adjourned. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.